Do you know someone who is being taken for granted? Is it you? Are you being taken for granted in a relationship? Have you been taken for granted in the past? Do you understand what it means to be taken for granted and how that affects you personally and a relationship on a whole? So many times we engage in relationships, whether it is friendships, whether it is couples, you're a couple with someone else or married to someone else. At some point during the relationship, you start taking things for granted, not necessarily the person. You start taking little things for granted. The fact that they say goodbye or they kiss you when you're going out the door, or the fact that they made your favorite breakfast sandwich and they serve it to you at the table or maybe put it in a little brown bag, or the fact that they text you during the day, I love you. Those are things that most people think should be natural and should come naturally. But in many relationships, those things that started that way, they don't always end up that way. And you can testify, right? You're probably in a relationship where you're thinking, yeah, I used to do those things, or the other person used to do those things, and they no longer do those things. If you talk to people who've been in relationships for a long time, 20 years or more, they'll tell you, those things don't matter. And then there are others that say, yeah, they do matter. We still do those things. And those are probably the people with the healthier relationships because they recognize that not taking those things for granted equates to not taking the person for granted. Many of us are taken for granted by our children, by our spouses, by our partners, or just in general. Even on our jobs, sometimes we're taken for granted. It's like everybody expects you to make the coffee. You made a coffee one time, somebody said the coffee tastes good, and the next thing you know, you're stuck being a coffee person. How the Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But we get taken for granted in most areas of our lives. How can we stop that process? How can we stop people taking us for granted? Well, you know me, I talk about the truth. And for those who actually do know me, they know that what I'm saying is true. You speak up, you tell the other person how you feel. Now, a lot of times, because I've done this in counseling, a lot of times you tell the other person how you feel and they still ignore that. They stop doing what they've always done or what they did to get you, right? It's like that bait and switch thing. A lot of people in new relationships, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna rub your back and I'm gonna clip your toenails and stuff like that. And then later in the relationship, you say, honey, can I clip my toenails? And you get the head spinning exorcist movement going on because that person is like, what the shave your toe, like they never did it before. Because a lot of things happen to interrupt that process when you're in a relationship, any relationship. You get too comfortable. You get too comfortable with the other person. You start thinking, you know what, they're not going to miss me doing that. Or you get too busy, you don't have the time. For many people in relationships, one of the number one things I hear is, I'm too busy, I just don't have the time. Between the children, work, and cleaning the house, when am I going to get time to clip somebody's toenails? It's just an unreasonable request. And that may be true, but there are other ways to show that you're not taking the person for granted. There are other things you can do that don't require a lot of time. The most important point in not taking the person for granted is making time to do something. It doesn't matter how small, it is still significant. But for most of us, we think that the significance, it has to be above the board for us to show. It's like you put a neon in the sky, I love you still. No, it doesn't have to be that. It could be simple gestures and it could be daily gestures. And it doesn't have to be an over influx of, grandeur. Start doing little things to show the other person that you appreciate them. Start doing little things to show the other person that they're important to you, that you care for them. There are a lot of people that feel that money is a replacement for everything. They feel that if they give you money, that if they buy a purse for you or something expensive, that should denote that you care. How about a flower? How about a single rose? How about just, a whisper in the ear? How about a simple hug? How about a simple hand holding? Those are things that build intimacy in relationships. Those are things that allow the intimacy to grow to the point where the person understands without a shadow of a doubt that they're loved, that they're appreciated, that they're not taken for granted. There are certain cultures where being taken for granted is like it just happens. It's like in the Caribbean where I grew up, you have certain stereotypes. The women do things with the house, the men go out work. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't been home in a long time. But there's certain cultures where being taken for granted is something that occurs more often than not. How about we develop a not take me for granted day? Because I think that's what Mother's Day is supposed to be, right? Mother's Day is supposed to be, you realize that I'm a mother, I give birth to you, and I did a great thing. And I think we should have a don't take me for granted day, not just for women, but for men as well, because there are men out there who are being taken for granted also. My brother's in pain. I know that I counsel men as well. And a lot of times they're in the same position as us. But I think that society feels, or society has depicted this whole thing that, women are taken for granted, and then don't include the men. It's not a sex thing, it's a general thing. People are being taken for granted because somebody failed to recognize that when you do not recognize that person, when you do not acknowledge the things that they're doing, that it can deteriorate to the fabric of the relationship. It goes downhill from there. And one of the biggest red flags that is a result of taking someone for granted is the fact that resentment creeps in. And resentment is as sure as putting someone in a casket and saying the last vows on that person. Because once resentment takes root, that's when you come and see me. And I don't want you to get there. I'm trying to do these videos so you can be preventative, so you can help yourself. There's another way where you can take someone for granted. There are men and women alike. It's not a gender issue. It's both parties are guilty. Where that person might have been attracted to that person, and they're attracted to them because of their beauty or because of one quality or something that stands out. And there is like they pay reverence and homage to this person, and they're just looking at that one thing that attracted them, and they don't see this person. They don't really identify with the person. They don't understand that person because they don't take time to get to know that person. That's another way of taking someone for granted. Just because you married her because she was beautiful, or you married him because he was drop down dead gorgeous, does not mean you should not take time to get to know each other. The honeymoon does not last always. It should, maybe not, but it doesn't last always. Relationships are about getting to know each other, learning each other's characteristics, learning each other's idiosyncrasies, learning each other's just nerdiness, the things that they do that might upset you. You will spend more time in the relationship getting to know each other than you will getting to just look at the initial attraction. Then the other way that you can actually take someone for granted is just ignoring that person, just putting them there as though they were a fixture in your life. You wanted a husband, you wanted a wife, you wanted a child, you wanted a job, and you just put it there and you idolize it, and you don't touch it. You don't take it out, you don't play with it, you don't engage with it. It's just there, it's an adornment. A lot of us are, I call us collectors. We collect things, and we collect people in our lives. And when you collect people in your life, you can take those people for granted because you haven't engaged with them. You haven't gotten to know them, like I said previously. A perfect example is have you ever watched Beauty and the Beast? I remember the rose. I said this in a counseling session recently. I remember the rose, and there was one rose, and the glass was over that rose, and the beast had one petal left on the rose before he remained a beast permanently. But there are many of us who do that. We have the flower, and we have the glass covering the flower, and there's only one rose left, and that rose petal is about to fall. And before that rose petal falls, you need to learn how to appreciate the person in your life. You need to learn how to stop taking that person for granted, because the rose petal will result in you not having the opportunity to go back and start over, unless the person allows you to start over. There's always grace. Please, let's start today by acknowledging your partners, by acknowledging your children, by acknowledging that person that you've taken for granted. And if you're the one who's being taken for granted, speak up. There's no better way than tell someone how you feel, than not telling them at all. You need to speak up. You have a voice. Use your voice to defend yourself and to support the notion that you are worthy to be treated with respect. My name is Ingrid Felton. Thank you so very much for stopping by today. As always, please continue to watch the YouTube videos, subscribe, tell other people about what I'm doing here. Continue to like the videos, and thank you. And I hope that today starts. I mean, I should petition the president. What do you think? We should have a not taking for granted day. Let that be your day today. Bye.